So my name is Luis J. Rodriguez. I've been going into prisons, juvenile halls, and jails for 40 years, doing creative writing classes, but also poetry readings, lectures, and healing circles. And what I'm going to talk about now is my creative writing classes. And they're not just about writing. I don't really teach people how to write. I kind of get into more why. Why writing is important. One, it's also about creative thinking and creative living. It's about how you shape your life through an art, any art. Because I think all arts have this very important capacity to heal, to transform. It isn't just doing creative things. That's beautiful. But really think of yourself as a person that's also a creative being, that you're constantly being made and reshaped. So you're constantly growing into yourself. And so one of the ways that I do that is to emphasize three things. One, that you need to be present in whatever you do. Writing, like all art, helps you get present, gets you placed, gets you to looking at your surroundings, what's what, who's who. Two, it helps bring some harmony and balance in your life, because most of us are out of balance. Most of us have chaos and uncertainty. Life is like that. How do you get balance? It's like a guitar. A guitar has to be tuned. But when you're playing it, it gets untuned. Life is like that. You're living, you're going to get unbalanced. How do you find a way to get centered again, to get in harmony? And then the third thing is how to be constantly creative. Creativity to me is the first step when things are in chaos, when there's crisis. It isn't, the first step isn't to find a new order. It's really to be creative about what needs to happen and then maybe find a shape. So I get people to think about three things in writing, creative writing, the way I do it. One, to examine your life. And it comes from Socrates, who had this great saying, an unexamined life is not worth living. I found it to be very profound, because most of us don't examine our life. We don't look back, we don't analyze, we don't assess, we don't really think about it. We don't think about the patterns we lived, we don't think about the habits we formed. We just go out and do things and then kind of, if I made a mistake, okay, keep going. It's about really examining who are you, and not just who, but what are the circumstances, what are your environment, who are your parents, your family, who are the community you grew up in, what is the social order that we're in, so that it all shapes you. And you need to examine it, but also who your gifts are, what your genius is, who are you, what is your own nature. These are things that are important. We don't teach people these things, and writing is one of the best ways. One story was, as some people already know, I was a very troubled young man myself. I was in and out of jails, I was in juvenile hall, I was on heroin and other drugs, I was in gang, I had been homeless. When I was a youth, I was really in bad shape, out of school and everything. But one of the things that happened is when I was 16, I was arrested during the Chicana moratorium against the Vietnam War. We were 5 cholos, and we were one of the first ones arrested because they accused us of starting the whole thing when somebody robbed this beer out of this liquor store on the corner of where Salazar Park was there during the moratorium. Now it used to be called Laguna Park, Salazar Park now. And so they arrested us cholos because we were evidently involved in the stealing, which I actually have to say we were. But the point was, it didn't matter. We tried to fight the cops. They knocked us down. They beat us up and they put us in the East LA jail. And then they took us to juvenile hall because all of us were underage. And there was a 16-year-old, I was 16, a 15-year-old, a 13-year-old. I think there was 2 16-year-olds. So it was about 5 of us anyway. And what happened is, in the middle of all that, they took us out of juvenile hall, put us in a bus, and took us to the Hall of Justice jail. I didn't tell us why. They had us all going to Murder's Row. Murder's Row is famous in the Hall of Justice. And it turned out that we were there when Charles Manson was there, because he was going to trial at the time. This is August 1970. So in Murder's Row, it was all black and brown except for Charles Manson. And they put me in a cell with 2 guys, big tall guys, and they split us up, but I had a 13-year-old with me. We weren't supposed to be there. This is 18 years old and over. But this is riots. They don't care. Anything can happen. And of course, the first night I was there, they tried to cut, the two big tall guys tried to cut my throat. They were threatening me. They wanted to get to this 13-year-old, whatever they want to do. But I'm saying, I told the kid, I'm going to defend you. I'll protect you. I'll do whatever I can. They might have to kill me, but I'm not going to let anybody mess with you. They look in your eyes to see how much fear you have. And they'll know if you're scared. You can take it as deep as you want, they'll know. I wasn't scared. I took them on. And they thought that was funny, so they took the razor blades out and we played cards all night long. That's the nature of that world. But what happened is Charles Manson was next door, and they would let him go out when all of us were behind bars because he was ranting and raving against black people, Mexicans, everybody. He was just going. And then they would put him in this kind of a padded cell. It wasn't like the rest of us bars. They had a special cell. When we were out there, so nobody would kill him. Everybody wanted to hurt this guy. They protected him. But I realized something, it took me a while. Who was protecting Luis J. Rodriguez? If I had woke up with my throat cut, who would care? Charles Manson was much more valuable than Luis Rodriguez or anybody like that. So one of the things that happened is people were playing cards. I didn't want to play cards that much. People were drawing. They were doing just talking. Somebody had a pen and pencil. And for some reason, I wanted to write. So books really got to me. They really grabbed my attention. When I was homeless, I used to go to downtown, and I used to hang around the Central Library. All kinds of books. I started reading Ray Bradbury science fiction books. I started reading Charlotte's Web like 20 times. You know, it didn't matter what it was. Children's books. I just love books, and I started getting interested in what I would call the Black experience books, autobiography, Malcolm X, Claude Brown, what's his name? Claude Brown's Man-Child in Promised Land, Perry Thomas's Down These Mean Streets. I started picking up these books and reading. I remember the poetry books, Don Ali's Scream, Don't Cry. There were so many amazing books. That was helpful because now I wanted to write. I didn't want to just read, I was writing. I mention that because in many ways, that's how your own purposes and your own destinies come to you. They call you, and sometimes we miss it. They call you in weird ways. I got called in that place. Just so people know, after several days and nights, they had arrested hundreds of people during the so-called East LA riot. Most of them were let go after 2 or 3 hours. They kept us several days and nights there. And they kept threatening us, we're going to get you for the murders of anybody that's dying. And that included 3 people, including Ruben Salazar of all people. Can you imagine? They were threatening us to get us for the murders of people, including Ruben Salazar, because they said we started the riot. But I think what saved us is that people were filming in those days. It wasn't video, it was filming Chicano activists, and they showed the police beating up people and the police tear gassing and the police killing people, including Ruben Salazar. So in the middle of the night, they came for me, threw me out, no charges. But I say the damage had been done because now I was into writing. Now I wanted to tell a story. Now I wasn't so much I want to fight in the gangs, and now I had like a vision. Something else had to change. I mention that because that to me is a transformative power and capacity in all art, and that really in the long run helped me because now I'm all about books. People may not know I have 16 books that are published now in all genres. Poetry, fiction, nonfiction, essays, children's books. I got 16 books after all that time in the jails and the streets. I had no imagination that I would ever do that. Here I am finally accomplishing something from a destiny seed that was planted. So that's why I think examining people's lives is important. The other E that I throw out there is evoking. Because writing has to get depth. Evoking some deep feelings, some deep thoughts. A lot of rage comes out, especially men, and they don't always realize that underneath all that rage, deep enough, is deep grief. And we have to tap into that grief. If we don't know how to do that, we're never going to get through why we're raging. The grief has to be tapped into. You have to realize there's probably abandonment, betrayal, neglect, all kinds of things that happen in people's lives that get you raging. And especially when you have PTSD and you're constantly in a rage mode, constantly the world's coming at you, you respond, you get triggered very easy. You don't even know why you're triggered. Somebody says something that normally wouldn't get nobody going, but it gets you going. Somebody does something, why? But you can't even explain it. So evoking the depth of everything. Underneath all that eventually can come joy, but you have to go deep. And so you're like mining your body, your soul. It's like you're in there going through all the dirt and mud and everything, but you're finding the gold somewhere. There's mud on top of all this gold, but underneath there is gold. There is something rich in everybody, but you can't always get to it until you get through all the muddy and the ugliness that's part of life. And that's what writing does. It helps evoke the depth. And so that's something that I learned myself, having done that. And as people know, I wrote this book, Always Running, that came out 1993. That was a book of depth reaching. I had to tell my story as a troubled young man because my own son, who I love dearly, who when I was 20 years old and I held him, helped transform my life. I promised to myself that I would never go back to heroin, to drugs, to gangs, or nothing because of him. And I've never come back to it. I never went back to jail. I never got into trouble again, holding my son. But then 15 years later, when he's a troubled young man, he joins a gang. He gets involved. He gets thrown out of school. He's homeless. I have to now chase him down the street, like people were chasing me. He ends up going to institutions. And eventually, the long run, he did 15 years in prison. It's sad. So Always Running was my big depth mining, and it helped heal me to the point that after 7 years of being on drugs, including heroin, and then 20 years of drinking on top of it, I actually sobered up. That book helped me. One of the catalysts, many of them, but that was one, that I could finally sober up. And of course, I've been sober now for 27 years now. So I've been just as many years sober now as I was when I wasn't. So the next E is expression. Because I think expressing what you do is important. How are you going to shape it? Is it going to become a poem? Will it be a story? Maybe a personal essay? Maybe it'll be a basis for a novel, which is a fictionalized version of real things sometimes. Maybe it's a script for a movie. Maybe it's a play. There's a lot of ways to express what you're going through. And I think expression is a level of shaping that requires craft and skill and maybe commitment. Not everybody wants to go there. So I work with people and say, get this stuff out, get it out. Some people are happy with that. They have journals. I go, use your journal all the time. Some people don't want to make a life as a writer, and that's fine. It takes another commitment, another calling that says, I really want to be into the writing world. So I help those that want to go to that level. I'm not surprised, but people might be surprised that in prisons, there's a lot of great script writers, a lot of playwrights, a lot of people have written novels. Some of them will never get published, but they've spent years having developed their work. So it's really amazing that I can work with them if that's at the level they want to. And I think that's part of what the expression is. Most of it's spoken word, rap, poetry. Poetry is one of the most expressive arts. And so I want to address then the various genres, because then you got to think about, okay, what's best? One, each genre has different purposes and different directions and different, and what I call inhabited by different spirits. So what is the main spirit that inhabits poetry? I would say it's language and voice more than anything. You can have a narrative in poetry. You can have a lot of shaping that doesn't even have to rhyme. You can make it rhyme, you can make it meter, but you can just free verse. It's all, but what I think gives it its power as poetry is how much you're into the language, the words, how they come together, how interesting and compelling you can bring words together, but also the voice. The voice is yours. Only you could have written this. It's the voice, that's the imprint of a personal life. And poems can do that. And that's really where you want to bring that out. Now, a short story or a novel can have poetry and can have a personal imprint, can have your voice, but that's not really what inhabits it. What inhabits novels, short stories, and probably I would say plays and even scripts is story. How to tell a good story. And that means you can do it from beginning, middle, and end. But if you get that process, you can even change it. Sometimes people start at the end. Sometimes they start in the middle. Sometimes they have other ways. You can move it around. The idea, though, is keep a good story going. Don't let nothing get in the way of a good story. And that's what I think those genres help you. And again, you can be very great language, but I have written, for example, short stories or novels, and I've had great language. I've had to throw it out because it gets in the way in the story. See, this is beautiful work, but I can't. It doesn't work for the story. The story is the most compelling part. So that's what I think is important. And again, when you use plays or scripts, then you got to think about another level, which is the visual. It's not about what you're reading now. When you're doing a play or a movie, you got to think of how it works visually. So visually is the spirit that inhabits these genres. Dialogue, of course, the action. You got to think. You can't just start exposition all the way through a film. You can't do that. It's got to come alive with the dialogue and the action and the character development and the tension that you build and you try to release. These are great things that you have to know about scripts and plays. That's what inhabits them, the visual elements that allows that to happen. So I think that's what's good about knowing all the genres. And because I've written in all the genres, when I go into an institution, they generally are interested in each one, and I will spend time explaining them. I'm not really trying to get them to learn to write fantastic scripts, but I do give them examples of fantastic scripts. They can read it when they're in their cells, or when they're working in their journals. They can develop their work the way they want to. I will read it and get back. I'll give them feedback. We will address certain issues that, for example, a workshop participant is interested in. How do you develop dialogue? Or people have asked me about memoirs. Memoirs is very popular now. Memoirs have the combination of actually being novelized, but they're real stories. You don't make up memoir. But the difference with memoir and a journalistic thing is memoir is based on memory. And memory is faulty by nature. You can't lie, you can't exaggerate, but you have to rely on memory, and people give you that license, but just don't lie. So that's a big issue. The other thing that people always think about is how to make raps, even music, combine genres, which I think is fine. Rap is kind of poetry with sound and rhythms and ideas and everything, and it takes it to another level. Or spoken word, slam. People like to do this. They want to do the spoken word presence, which is knowing how to be present in your writing, but also in your body. How to be present on the stage, how to present, how to own a stage, while you're walking, and how you move. Then that's another development of skill that people have to take into account when your body's involved. Some people want to do dance and poetry. So you can mix genres if you understand, again, the spirit of each. I have also been, like I said, worked on TV shows, and I've written scripts, and I've written a play. So I can help with that part of it. Some guys are really into it, and they're not interested in poetry as much, or even exposition, or even novels, but they really want to do amazing play. Let's do it. One time I was at one of my classes, and this guy was in the class. He said a lot, spoke a lot, but he never presented any writing. And it's okay. I don't make a big deal about it. As long as he's in my class and he's there, I'm fine. At the very end, he presented a play. And it was beautiful that we actually performed it. He wanted all the parts to be played by the guys in the class. Everybody got a piece, and we all performed it with everybody reading their part. It was amazing. It was beautiful. Beautiful. It wasn't very long, but it was beautiful. So I think that's what you wait for. You wait for those moments, those epiphanies that happen in a classroom made up of very troubled, traumatized, highly hurt guys, but also people that want to transform, want to change. They want to contribute at another level. They really want some decency in the world, even though the world has been very hard on them, and they haven't always been decent. They really are striving for that. One of the things that I think is important is imagery, and what a reason I mention imagery is we tend to say things and not realize that you got to make the images come alive. And metaphors is one of the key ways. Be creative in your metaphors. Metaphors are a way to use to say one thing, comparing one thing by bringing another thing and bringing the truth of the first thing. For example, when somebody says, metaphors and similes. When somebody says, he's fast as a deer. Okay, that's a comparison, that's a simile. Because when you have the word like or as, it becomes a simile. Well, what does that do? That gives you an image. And I didn't have to tell you, he's a fast guy. I told you he's fast as a deer, so you got an image now. And that image imprints more in our brains better. So now you really get it. But that's a dead metaphor. Everybody's used that. Now you got to come up with interesting ways of saying it. I don't know, I can't think of it right now, but I think the point is find ways to make the metaphors and similes come alive, and that they're better about the imprinting of the image. And so I think that's important, whether you're writing whatever genre, the imagery has to come alive. Metaphors and similes are one of the ways of doing it. And then of course the sound. The sound has to be taken with skill. There's rhyming that helps with some. You find the rhythms inside the words. And there's alliteration, which has to do, again, with similar words, similar consonants coming together. Like the letter L could be repeated. The label of a lullaby levels things, whatever it might be. In other words, you're thinking about how sound gets created with words. And English, for being a very complicated language, and I try to dominate English. I still speak Spanish. I'm even learning a few native Nahuatl words. I'm trying to get more into other languages. But it's a very interesting language, English, because it's got so much to it. It's got romance. It's got romantic roots, Latinate roots. It's also got the Old English, Germanic roots. It's got other roots coming in there, and it makes for a hell of a sea to swim in, So I think that's important to know how to use the language well. And so what I would like to do is kind of then bring in this very important concept. What is the purpose of all this? One is to learn to make masterpieces. I mean, a great poem that will last, a great painting, a great musical score, a great play. Everybody's always looking for a masterpiece, and I'm not against any of it. Some people have many masterpieces. We're talking about Picasso's, we're talking about Chopin, we're talking about all these people who got many. But I think for our purposes, the real masterpiece that I think we want to get to is you, the actual writer, the actual creative person, because all of us are in the process of being. We're creative all the time. And I have a concept that to be a complete human being is to be a complete artist. So that's what you move through. And your real masterpiece is you. Can you be that whole, complete, developed, healthy human being, even though your life hasn't been that way? Even though there's a lot of material that's rough and mean and ugly, but you still got to use that material to create that masterpiece who is you. That to me is important. So one of the things I tell people is see yourself as a house of energy. In the Nahuatl language, it's Teocalli. Teocalli means house of energy. And the energies are really within you, but they're also in nature. For indigenous people, everything that we have is connected to nature. Nature is our teacher. Nature is how we heal. It's also how it can hurt us if we're not careful. Nature's got beautiful, amazing things. It's got destructive things. We have to learn how to relate to it. In accord with nature, we can do almost anything. You follow nature. You don't take over. You don't dominate. You don't destroy. You don't make it something that is not. You work with nature to even develop technology. Technology was always for us to be in accord with it. So how does it work when you're a house of energy? A house of energy is also a temple. It's also a mountain. You would call it a mountain, Teocalli. Anything that had energy. So what you do is you look at the elements within you. For example, start with fire. There's fire inside of you. Well, one, physically, we're 98.6, which is really hot. But the fire I'm talking about is within the soul, the psyche. You have passion in there. There's vision there. There's the passion could be terrible, burning fire, rage, unless it's tempered. So you got to know how to temper that fire. You don't want to be just fire burning yourself and others. You want it to have a kind of a sense of the passion and the direction and vision, but not to burn everything around you. Another element is earth. Earth is grounding. Earth, for us, Mother Earth holds us. Mother Earth is welcoming. It's abundance. But if you're not careful, it could be stuck in there. You could be stuck in there. You could be like, I'm unable to move. How many people get stubborn and they can't move, and they're grounded too much that they don't actually have traction. So you got to think about those things. You want to make sure it's properly set up. We should take water. Water is a very amazing energy. Everybody's got 70% water, and the earth is 70% water. So water is the biggest element, and water goes everywhere, right? Water can flow through anything. Water doesn't have the kind of thing where it stops. It just goes through everything. But here's the problem: if you take too much water, you're just going everywhere. You're not really stabilized. You're just, wherever it goes, that's where you go. So you got to know how to have the right amount of water. Water's healing. Water's reconciliation. Water's where tears come from. Water's the blood that flows. So you want to keep that kind of water in you. You don't want to get to the point where now you're all over the place and you don't even know who you are. Air is the other element, and air, of course, is everywhere. We breathe air. Air goes into the beautiful trees called our lungs inside of us. Air goes through the trees and gives us the life we need. And we're all connected with air because we all breathe the same air. And so we all have the same asphyxiation. And words like inspire come from air. It comes from bringing in a certain amount of air into your life. So it's important to know how to have air in your life, how to be able to be in the world, how to take flight, how to be like birds and all these things. But the problem with too much air, and I would have to say the only example is to be like an airhead. You have too much air, you don't really have much solidity, you're willing to, just go along with everything. So you got to get balanced. Have enough air, the air that allows you to get inspired, to move through you, to change is really part of the nature of air. Change, that's why trees change. They go from winter dead, look like dead trees, but they're not. All the sap is going to the bottom of the roots, but then when spring comes up, it all comes up. They come alive, branches, flowers, fruit, all kinds of things. So you got to learn to be like that. So I think what I want to do is kind of just say, this is the purpose and meaning behind what I do. It's quite extensive. If we can get into all of what it takes to write, but it's more about you as a creative being, an imaginative being. And I'm going to end with this. Whatever we do as human beings, with art, with writing, whatever it is, we got to bring more beauty in the world. But there's also a lot of ugliness. There's beauty in ourselves, in our relationships, but there's a lot of ugliness. So we just got to bring more beauty. And art is all about the beautiful, the proper relations with parts to the whole, the integrity of how art works, whether it's painting, whether it's dance, whether it's theater, whatever we do, music. There's all kinds of ways in which art can be beautiful. Two, I think we have to bring more truth. And this is a hard thing in our time today, because truth is now being questioned. Nobody knows it's even truthful. Everybody's lying and acting like it's all truthful. Even as we're going through the pandemic that we're all going through, there's not even clear understanding about what is truth. I think I can get the truth. It takes a lot of discernment and a kind of reference framework to know what is truthful, and it can be gotten. But it's important for all of us to bring the truth of our lives, of our situations, of what we see. Truth is a battle now for our country and our world. And I think it's important. That's one of the things that artists and writers do. And the third thing is just to bring more goodness. We need more goodness. There's enough hurt. There's enough pain. Some of us have caused a lot of pain and hurt. But we don't have to continue it. And I don't care what people have been through, because I've worked with a lot of guys who've been in prison for many years who are now released or even still in prison. I've seen a lot of decency come out of them. That's important to me. Be decent in the world. Be decent to your relationships. Be decent to yourself. Because we're not always decent to ourselves. We're harder on ourselves. Be decent to the kids you love, the kids you have, other kids. Mentor, guide, be decent in community. To me, it's what makes all this worthwhile. Thank you.